Hello and welcome. My name is Luke George and I'm having conversations with courageous educators. Courageous educators that make courageous decisions and make big differences in little people's lives. Today I'm so pleased to be able to speak with Dr. Ray Boyd. He's been a marathon runner and has had 34 years in education. He has been Principal of the Year in 2014, been to Harvard Business School, and it's also just opened a brand new primary school called Dayton Primary School. He has done some amazing things and has some great stories, one of which was really interesting in actually closing down a school and what he learned from that. But he talks about other pieces of his life that made a difference. His joint effort to be able to create the Centre of Excellence with two other principals. Very courageous. He looks at an instructional alignment and how passionate he is about that, to be able to have a continuous curriculum from the very start to the very end. So it's about focusing on teaching and about how the difference between support and success and how necessary they need to be at the same time. So sit back and have a listen to the pearls of wisdom of a man that has given his life to education and making a difference. His readings, his science, and his influence is phenomenal. Please enjoy a conversation with a courageous educator, Dr. Ray Boyd. My name's Luke George and welcome to Conversations with Courageous Educators. My guest today has been acknowledged as Principal of the Year, represented Australia in track and field events, and has recently opened a new primary school. He's a passionate educator who at times has made courageous decisions that have changed student progress. Regardless of what he does, he works to make a difference through deliberate action underpinned by clear goals. Welcome, Dr. Ray Boyd. How are you today, Ray?
Welcome. Great to be on board, Luke.
Fantastic. Look, I think everyone would have to be asking what it would be like those pinnacle moments for you when you were representing Australia in track and field. Did you get the green and gold uniform and that sort of thing? Was it that sort of highlights in your career?
Oh, most definitely. The world cross country as a junior, and then later on as a senior to get the green and gold, certainly a buzz. But probably the biggest one was to get to the World Championships track and field, because they have the celebration that you have on the track, similar to what you see at the Olympics and the Com Games. You don't sort of experience that at world cross country. So to make the track and field team and represent the marathon, that was a big buzz. And more so because it was actually in the birthplace of athletics in Athens, in the original stadium. And even a highlight to that, Vangelis came along and played the piano, Chariots of Fire. So that was an absolute huge buzz. That was probably one of the highlights of my athletics career, actually.
Yeah. And I dare say you must have met heaps of people. Across your career, do you still keep in touch with some of those athletes and competitors from so many years ago in some way?
Oh, look, most definitely. Social media has that advantage, but we crossed paths. Steve Monaghetti's still very active in the athletics world, so he comes to Western Australia. I've managed to catch up with him coincidentally a few times over East. Lee Troops in the US, so we still communicate occasionally through the background. So there's plenty of people around. Another chap, what's his name? Julian Painter, who got into cycling. He reached out and came and stayed with us because he was doing the big cycling tour. So I said, mate, come and stay there. You can borrow my car. And he was using our place as a base. So it's a very small community. It's a bit like education. It seems like a big community, but it's actually very small, and it doesn't take much to reconnect.
Yeah, that's a great story. I suppose that's like anything, being part of a tribe, being part of a group. But would you also say about putting in, like you've got to put in, it's not always taking out. And is that the sort of thing that you've been doing in your running and in your education?
Yeah, I mean, putting in example of that is obviously I don't compete as much as I compete very rarely other than down south there's a big event, the Blackwood Marathon. That's a community type event. We do that as a bit of a laugh, but I did coaching at Guildford Grammar for 10 years, and I've coached a number of athletes because that's a way that I can give back. My coach always, Marg Saunders, gave up so much of her time, and that was something she taught me. So if you look at her, she paid it forward in some ways. This is my way of paying it forward to the next generation and contributing and offering guidance and support if and when people need it.
It seems like that's a sense of modelling, because for me to be able to give back, I must have at some stage seen it and experienced the effect it had on me. So this modelling idea, you spoke about your coaches there. Do you think that's where you got that idea and the sense of giving back and paying forward?
Yeah, well, look, very much so. If I draw on Marg Saunders, my coach, I met her at a very young age, 13 years of age. Most people know the story, but I come from a split family. So Dad obviously working and earning money. Marg sort of became a career. She got me to competitions. She was always supportive. She gave her time. She never asked for anything in return. So if I'm seeing that happening, then obviously that's the environment that I'm brought up in. Gary Pryor went on to be a key prosecutor for the police. He was another one of my early coaches, and he used to pick myself and my brother up and drive us up in the hills to do the club runs. So again, never asked for anything in return. So if you're brought up in that environment, you don't know any better.
Well, we can speak about athletics all day, but of course we want to talk to about courageous educators. I'm always interested in what brings people into this beautiful industry of education. I remember as I was growing up, it was always about I always wanted to be a teacher. What about yourself, Ray? Did you also, as a young lad, always wanted to be a teacher, or did it take an interesting track for you?
It took an interesting track. I always wanted to be an architectural draftsman like my father. And then one day he just said, look, you don't have to follow in my footsteps. So teaching, I don't know why, but it was the natural progression, probably because I enjoyed phys ed and I thought I'll have a go at being a phys ed teacher. And then got into teaching that way. But just that wanting to make a difference, I was very fortunate as a young kid to have come across some incredible educators. My primary school teacher, Greg Bryce, Peter Pendlebury, Mrs. Madigan, all great teachers, and they had an influence on me and obviously my classmates. So that's sort of, we can do that. Let's get into that. So I got into teaching, and it was always all about making a difference and being a difference for a kid, even if it's only a small difference. Yeah. And there's not too many people you speak to anywhere in the world where they can't give you an example of a difference a particular teacher made. The hard bit about that, though, is sometimes that difference is a negative difference. And because of an experience a kid had, it changes their path or makes them feel, I'm not going to do that. And fortunately for me, it was always a good experience, so the positive role model in that sense. But we have an impact on kids. We make a difference, and that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
I know that you refer to the raindrop in the pond, and you speak about that raindrop, and that can be a positive or a negative influence. And it's just this beautiful example of education that it really does. All those little raindrops in that pond does fill the pond, but each one has a rippling effect. So being in that positive space is by far a greater impact than the other side. But sometimes it doesn't quite go that way, but I reckon we're getting better.
Oh, definitely getting better. And if you take that analogy of the raindrop a step further and think of it as a glass of water, if you've got a clear glass of water, so that's all your positive experiences and that's the culture and the environment you've created, and you drop a black bead of water into it, the water doesn't change because there's so much positivity around that environment. So it actually changes the black water into clear water. Obviously, the inverse is exactly the same. If you're very negative environment and you drop of water, that water is invisible. It becomes, and that tends to be what happens. The drop tends to mimic whatever that environment and that culture is.
Yeah.
Again, fortunately for me, most of that has been a positive experience. But yeah, it's a really powerful analogy, that pond and that raindrop. One raindrop doesn't make a difference, but you get a group of them together, that's where you get things happening.
Yeah. Now, just before we get into your, all these great other great accolades, it does bring me back to, I doubt if too many people know about this, but when you were at Teachers College, which is now ECU, you had a bit of a hand at being a bit of an actor, and you starred in this great show called Arby Stark and the Fuzznars. Now, was this an example of the can-do attitude of Ray Boyd?
Yes and no. Look, my girlfriend was big on in the drama. I always wanted to sort of be a bit of an actor, but most of the crew we hung around with, your brother Quince, that was the crew we hung with, and George White sort of sucked us in. And to some extent, he almost wrote the play around this group of individuals, because I played a worm and I was a long, slinky guy, and Quince was always he was just at it, and he was Arby Stark, and then we had Sam the cagey cockroach was Steve Dixon. So, but look, that was good fun. That was that probably the biggest challenge for that was when George said, "You need to sing." I was like, "Really, George? Have you heard me sing?" So that was like, oh, okay, this will be a can do sort of thing. So I got into it. But yeah, God, that's a blast from the past. Arby stuck in the Fuzznars.
I thought I might just throw that in. Look, you've been in the game for 34 years and you've done 20 years of leadership. Pardon me, there was one principal posting that was quite opposite to the role of a school leader. And instead of building up, it was closing down. So there was that time where you needed to close down a school because they just didn't have the numbers, etc. Is that right in your career?
Yeah. You're spot on, Luke. That was back in 2004. So I was working as a deputy with Dr. McNeil over at Ellenbrook. And Rose Moroz, the district director, since passed away, asked if I'd come over and said, look, can you come over and take over Midland? But it's a unique situation. The numbers just aren't there. And the school needs to start a process of closing down. The previous principal had moved on. So it was horrible in the sense that I had to close something down. So you were spot on the money. As an educator, we build things up, and this was actually bringing something down. But again, it taught me some really valuable skills because I had to get out in the community. I visited every family. I spoke to the kids. We liaised with the teachers in terms of where they were going to go and the impact it was going to have on them. And I'd been connected with other schools. So it was a really big learning experience, but it wasn't my favourite one. And that's why Dayton's so unique in the sense that this is the yang of the yin for me.
Yeah. That would be just the way you were speaking about that and the expression on your face. It was really like this bit of a grimace about what you were doing because it's going against all of really why we want to make a difference, and closing something down is not making a difference in the sense of you being able to handle it. But maybe I suppose the flip side is that the difference could be made when those students go to another school and get a bigger and better education. Yep. Would that be one of those times in your life that it was actually uncomfortable, when you really felt uncomfortable? Because I dare say the first conversation you had with the first parent, thinking that you'd now have to have another 70 or so of those again, you must have really had to dig deep, I suppose, each time you had that conversation.
Oh, look, it was really horrible because as a deputy stepping into my first principal's job, I knew what I was going into. So I was going into a community that did not want their school shut down. No community wants their school shut down. Mm. I was going into a community where teachers were going to be displaced. The kids are pretty easy in the sense that kids bounce off what parents do, but everything about that was so hard. The parents there'd been the previous principal hadn't moved on because they didn't want to close the school down. It was a little level 4 school. Mm. She'd gone on because she won a promotion. But the community saw that as, it's definitely happening, which it was. But it's like, she's moved because she doesn't. No, she moved because she actually got a promotion. And having to explain that with people that had not so much a closed mindset, but it just was like, that's another nail in the coffin for us. Yeah. Having to explain that process and say it's it's coincidental. There's no relation between that principal moving on and me coming in and the school closing down. They're just coincidental.
Yeah. Well, let's get on to something else. The next little part of your great career, a milestone in 2014, you were named Principal of the Year, a significant acknowledgement. What was that year like compared to all the others, and what do you think it was that attributed to you receiving such an honour?
Look, I'm a figurehead of the school, and I know you do a lot of reading too, Luke, and your listeners are probably reading as well. Leadership's an interesting beast. I'm the figurehead of my school, and I'm only as good as the work that my school does, but I set the direction and we put the structures in place, etc., to make that happen. So it was great because I saw that actually as an accolade for what the teachers in the school had been doing, and they've been doing across the community, particularly around the work that had been going on since 2009. For me, it was a bit more than just an award for a Principal of the Year. It was a vindication that what the school had been doing for the last 5 years had actually paid off and was actually acknowledged. My associate principal and a few other staff had nominated me previous years, and we'd missed out. Nothing had changed, but we just missed out. There's reasons for why I think we missed out. Again, not that I was doing things to get a pat on the back, but it was a really good chance to celebrate the work that the staff had done and say, look, guys, I'm here because of everything that you had done. So it was sort of like a community celebration in some regards, and a thank you to the students and a thank you to the staff. So it was a good accolade. It was a real good accolade in the sense too that the two other schools we were working with, it was an acknowledgement of the work that they'd been doing as well.
Yeah. It brings me to a point of when I'm working with leaders in regards to what leadership looks like. So I use an inverted triangle with the students on the top. Yep. They're the most. Then you have your staff, your middle leaders, your deputies, and then you have your principal on the bottom, which is that inverted hierarchy. And on the left-hand side, we have support, which is that principal supporting everybody above them. And on the other side is success. And I reckon that's what you were just describing. It was your leadership and supporting everyone to be the best they could. And then the success then floats down through each individual, but down to yourself. How do you feel? Is that sort of a picture of what you were looking at? So everybody gets that success for that support that you gave and everybody moving up the chain?
Yeah. I mean, I understand and I do see that inverse, that pyramid, upside down inverse pyramid, but there's at times too where I think it's sort of straight up and down. As a principal, there's times where you're supporting, and that's Hershey and Blanchard's model. There's situational leadership. There are times when you are directing and there's times when you're supporting, but there's also the time where the principal sort of steps away because the staff are actually doing the work and the success. So Luke George and Ray Boyd are both teachers. Luke's getting success. Luke helps me, so then I get that success, and we start to feed off each other.
Yeah.
And because one person's achieving, the next person wants to do and be in the same category. So it's sort of it's almost a symbiotic relationship in the way that they work together.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that a little later on in our conversation is how do you get that symbiotic? Because I dare say sometimes it's actually nearly in silos, and we need to be able to bring those people together. But before we get down that path, I'm interested in this. During the introduction, was that the deliberate action underpinned by clear goals. Is this a carryover from your running career? Because I know that you're very keen on direction and clarity and goals, but it's this deliberate action that really is a significant piece of that particular quote. Is that where it comes from, running, or do you think that's just always?
Yeah, it does. It comes out of that. It does come out of that, Luke, and that's and it comes out of growing up with Dad as a single parent. Although we switched in things, so I saw Dad set goals, but at the end of the day, as an athlete, it's great to have a goal, but if you don't do anything, you're not going to achieve the goal. Saying you want to go to the Olympics and then sitting in the armchair drinking beer and eating potato chips isn't going to get you to the Olympic Games. So there's setting a goal is the first part, and then there's the actions that you have to put in place for that to occur, and there's also the establishment of a direction you need to go. Mm-hmm. Now, most principals, if you go to any school that's running really well, there'll be generally the principal, but there'll be a clear goal that they're trying to achieve. Broad, it might be a vision. Yeah. There's clear direction in the way they want to go, and then there's a set of actions that need to be followed through or done to enable that goal to be achieved. Now, whether that happens overnight or 15 years down the track, that's it. You can't have a goal without. You can't achieve a goal without actions, and actions without a goal, well, you might as well just run around in circles because you don't know where you're actually going.
I think I'd
rather so that definitely came out of athletics.
Yeah, I think I'd just rather, I suppose, remain on the couch and then don't do any running, and then you don't have to achieve the goal and just hope. That could be another alternative.
Yeah, well,
which doesn't work.
You just switch your goal. I'm going to watch Netflix for the next 24 hours. Just change the goal. It's
easy,
and sometimes you do have to do that. You change the goal to match the actions. It's easy.
I'm interested. Is getting clarity a difficult thing to do? The way you just described that vision, goal set, then you've got your actions and your steps moving towards that. It's sometimes I see, with good intention, but it's a rather hefty document with lots of information. I sort of work on the pretext of simpler is better, so it's clearer. Mm-hmm. I find it's more difficult to make things simple and clear than it is to make it complex and a little bit of chaos. Is that a difficult spot in your world, Ray, when you're putting all that together? Do you need to spend a bit of time trying to make it clear and simple so people know where they're going? Because I think we've all got goals and visions, but maybe it's still not clear enough for people to be able to understand moving forward. So is there a bit of work in that space, making it clear?
Look, there certainly is. And I like some other principals who've been in established schools and then moved into a new school. There's two very different processes between going into a school that's established and setting a direction and being clear about it, and then going into a foundation school like Dayton and setting a direction and being clear about it. In the West Beachboro scenario, where we actually changed a lot of things we did, so we had to be clear, and this is what we want to achieve, this is why we want to achieve it, and then we had to nut out what each step actually looked like, because I can't walk into a room of teachers and say, we're going to improve reading, and then leave the room.
Yeah.
Because now each person knows what the goal is, but each person goes about it a different way. So we could be wasting so much energy on 15 different versions of how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
In the new school, it's easier because we don't have to change anything. This is the goal. This is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to support you. And everything's new. The hard bit's making sure we've got the supports in place and they're ready to go. And keeping it simple, I love what you said there. We have kept it simple, but even within simplicity. So if we look at an instructional framework and there's 15 steps, we lay the 15 steps out to staff. But what we started to do now is last year and going into this year, last year we worked through, let's pull apart what step 1 looks like. Let's pull apart what step 2 looks like. So we're up to about step 4 at the moment. So we're slowly pulling those apart. It gives teachers a chance to work on each one and refine it as they go. And the big buzz thing, it's been around for years, but the big buzz thing is cognitive load.
Yeah.
Teachers are in the same boat.
Yeah.
So when you were spot on, when you say you've got to be clear and simple, you do, because if you give them too much, it's just overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. So it's a really difficult space to actually live in as a principal and a leadership team in trying to get that balance right about being clear and precise without overdoing it.
Yeah. I liked your reference there about your 15 steps. A couple of things came to mind was 15 steps. All right, let's start, and with no time frame, etc. And you've actually just talked about how it's 1, let's get that sorted, then 2. And it just takes a period of time to get through it. And whether that's a brand new school or something that's on change, I think that's where that cognitive overload comes on board as well. It's just we dump on too much, because especially if it's already in a school that's already functioning, it's about removing what we've already, it's like a transition. We've got to remove and move away from what we're already doing and slowly move into the other one, but it can't be a cut. And I always think that classic of, we look at the results and they're saying that our reading and literacy is not going too well. All right, let's move out of that program and we'll move into the new program. And within a term or two, all of a sudden we've just changed a program from something we've been doing for 5 years, and now we've started again. And I just see, if being in that position it's a lot of work. It's not only a lot of work for me to learn the new one, but it's a lot of work for me to move around from the other one. So there's actually a lot of change management, project management that needs to go around on there. So those steps are actually happening. So interesting.
And it's that clarity of language. It's that clarity of language too, Luke. That's the difficult bit. I saw a post on Twitter the other day. Lorraine Hammond said, "My explicit's not your explicit," and I love that, because that's something we've said to our staff when we first did our thing. We do explicit instruction, but let's talk about what it looks like in this school, because everyone's version's slightly different.
Yeah.
So it's getting that clarity and that understanding of, when we say this is a potato, this is what the potato looks like. No? And you say a potato, well, how many varieties of potato are there?
That's right.
So again,
I was down the shop the other day and they've got black ones, purple ones, pink ones. And we're saying, wow, there's a big variety, because I remember it was white. Which one do I get? So let's go to West.
I want a pair of jeans.
So let's go to West Beachborough Primary School, when you started there, and I think it was around about 2009 or so. What were or was it before that you started at West Beachborough? When did you get on?
I moved into. I was placed into West Beachborough in 2006 was when I got asked to go down there. And the significant changes started to occur in 2009.
Okay. So I'm interested about the 206 journey. And it's just really simply, what did it look like? And then when you left, what did it look like? What was the comparison just between the two? And maybe you can use your academic results or your cultural results. I'm just interested about that, because I know there's a bit of a change happening in that space.
So they definitely were, from when I came in to when I left, on polar opposites of the continuum line. Yep. There were scenarios where we had teachers that wouldn't go into certain duty areas because the kids would just eat them alive. We had kids moving in packs. Right. The classrooms were a little bit disruptive. There wasn't a lot of common language in the school. They were running 6 maths programs across from year pre-primary right through to year 7 at that time. Whoa. Various language programs. They'd had some intervention that had been in place for a number of years, and the kids were still leaving year 7 having been in intervention, having not moved, literally, well, not literally, they were still illiterate. All right.
That's terrible.
Move that to 221. We had a common language across the school for instruction. They were running 1 maths program. We had a single spelling program. We had a common language of instruction, and kids left the school literate and numerate. And we had a pretty solid behaviour thing in place.
Fantastic. And it's quite a change. And I suppose we're always fascinated about, how do we do those sorts of things? And by the sounds of things, you spoke about culture, you spoke about academic, you spoke about the literacy and numeracy. Again, does it come back to what we've already said about looking at a vision, being clear with the steps and the goals and how we're going to get there? And as I dare say, back in 2006, you must have really had to pare that down and just fix one situation at a time. So would have it been difficult to find out which one to start with and then move from there? So was there a one, or did you have to get 5 on the go?
There was a one, and it was a no-brainer. Again, when you look at your vision, you go, this is what we need to achieve. All right, what do we need to do that great? And I have a saying, what's your Air Force One? What's the most crucial, important thing that you need to do now? That's where energy goes, and everything else is just forget about it.
Yeah.
And behaviour was the critical one. Right? It wasn't a great safe place to be.
Yeah.
The teachers were dealing with behaviour in the classroom, so there was interrupted instructions. There's a theory called broken window theory.
Oh, yeah.
So little Bobby sparks up, then the other kids spark up. So what we did was we focused on behaviour. If kids were being feral, we pulled them out of the classroom. In extreme cases, we suspended them. So it gave the teachers a chance to actually focus on teaching, and it told the other kids that this behaviour is not okay. Yeah. So we actually set structures in place for around these are the expectations of behaviour. This is what we want to see in the classroom. If this doesn't happen, then we need to get it out, or we need to alter it or change it in some way. In some regards, it was a lot of it was punitive initially in that instance, but it was just like, we need to get this kid out so that the rest of the kids can get on with learning and the teacher can do that teaching. And then the teachers felt they were supported, because behaviour was the big one back then. Yeah. So that was the first one. Once the teachers had the chance, right, now I can teach, then we started to get some traction with actually the kids are actually starting to learn now. And they became a little bit of a controller in the sense that Luke George starts mucking around and they say, Luke, can you pull your head in, please?
Yeah, then it just comes down. So during that journey, and you'd already mentioned it before, you are interested about the backstory. You got together with another 2 schools, I'd say pretty well on the same trajectory, and actually created this centre of excellence. What's the backstory? And was that sort of like 3 principals getting together over a coffee and just discussing where they're at, and then deciding to say, let's do it together? Or was it organic or network? I'm interested. How did
that's pretty
it start?
much it. That is, you've pretty much nailed it on the head. You know, some of the best races in the world are created by 3 guys sitting in a pub having a beer.
Yeah.
If you look at the history of some of the big events, but that's not quite that, but that's pretty much spot on. So there was, we'd come out of the back end of an ERG, expert review group. The school had been whacked, so we'd come out of the back of that. And you heard me earlier on say the kids were leaving the school illiterate. It's like, well, the stuff the school's been doing, it's not having an impact. There's something just not right. So I was looking for something to bring into the school, be it an approach or something, just the way things were different. Greg Sullivan up the road at Dianella, that was a high ICSE school, felt the same. The kids could be extended. And Dave Wanstall over at Ballajura was in the same boat. So a chap called John Fleming came over and Ballajura hosted him. And Greg got into it. I missed it. Greg rang and said, mate, you need to see this guy. He's so on the money with what we're looking for and trying to do. And out of that, Dave and his deputy, Jane, again, who's since passed away, sadly, Greg's deputy and my deputy at the time, Gail Higgins, got together, had a coffee at their school and came up with the idea of, let's get together as 3 schools. Off we go. Let's create this coalition of schools. And we did. And we worked from end of 2009 to the end of 2015 and made huge differences across all 3 schools.
Yeah, look, in the sort of education circles, especially here in WA, that really was quite exciting. And you just pioneered a space that's actually gone on to do more things with explicit instruction, etc. So let's get into the next beautiful part of your career in regards to the opening of Dayton. Now, Dayton's brand new. It's just done its first birthday. That must have been quite exciting in the sense of having a blank canvas, going from concept to the opening of the doors. What was it that you must have placed a fair bit of effort into to be able to get to open those doors? Was it just about the whole building thing? Was it about curriculum? I sort of sense it might have been recruitment, if I know you well there, Ray.
Yeah, recruitment was a big one right from the get-go. I mean, I learned so many lessons in West Beachborough. It's actually interesting you make the point, Luke, that a lot of what those 3 schools did in terms of instruction has sort of shaped or influenced the wider system. We fought tooth and nail. We're actually swimming against the current when we came and did that. So while it's influenced things now, we were very much the black sheep of the crowd. So we had a lot of negativity around what we were doing. What I wanted to do in coming into Dayton was go, we can replicate this, not replicate it identically, but we can replicate this. And selecting staff was a big one, getting people on board who had the mindset of, I like what you're doing, I like kids, I'm open to learning, I want to come to the school. We didn't recruit for skill set. We figured to some extent we can actually teach skills, which you can. Yeah. As long as the person's a nice person, they're open to learning. So the recruitment was a critical one, but the chance to just put everything into place, it was just exciting. It's like, you know, you don't get too often a chance to start a new school right from the word go and get, touch wood, everything right. So there's that pressure in there too, because as soon as you embed something, Peter DeWitt in his work that he's now doing with Mike Nelson, the collective education, the leadership group over there, they talk about de-implementation, and we're trying to avoid de-implementation by implementing it right in the first way, which is a big thing that Pete talks about. If you get it right, you don't have to de-implement it. Yeah. So it's just about trying to get things right and build on it rather than have to pull things down and start again.
Yeah, I think that's...
But to have it say in the furniture and everything, it's great.
Yeah, because I remember seeing your LinkedIn stories. You're quite good in your social media and or the way you actually recruited people. You had them with Lego blocks. You had them. It was nearly like they were getting on board to for NASA. You know, like it was just full on. But I think it's that part about getting people uncomfortable and getting the people that you want that are prepared to do those sort of activities. So then you know that when it becomes a little bit harder and we need to get a little bit more uncomfortable, you've got what it takes. And I reckon that's the beauty about a new school, is that you get to have that staff that are ready to go on the vision. They believe in it, which it's just fantastic. And I dare say it's paying off for you. Would that be correct? That, you know, the staff that you've got, it's
definitely
starting to show.
We've got a great team. We've got a fantastic team. Rachel Lares, my associate principal, does an amazing job. She's a big part. She actually was the reason we did Lego, was because she connected with Joel Birch and said this could be a good way of recruiting. There's nothing, you know, sit down and interview one-on-one. Yeah. You know, a person can chin wag their way in, but once you get people playing with Lego and they drop their guard, now we're actually getting to watch people interact where their guard's down, and they, you know, you let your guard down, you're actually seeing the person. Yeah. So that chance to actually build a team where we go, you know what, these people, they're going to really work well together. And we see that, to use the term from Legacy, James Kerr's book, our staff sweep the sheds. They all get in there. They understand the word Ubuntu. They know that their actions influence everyone else's. They've just got that notion of community. I think it's one thing we've done really well is recruit, and it's making a difference. The school is, again, touch wood. You never say calm because then it goes chaos. But the school is a very calm place to be, and the classrooms are very calm.
Yeah.
I hate saying that.
You just said it.
I know.
Now, look, I dare say over the many years you've had all sorts of different spaces where you've been passionate about that. The current one, and I'm really interested about this space, is establishing an instructional alignment with high levels of consistency across a school setting. So I'm getting this sense that everybody understands, and you'd mentioned it before about, you know, I'm doing really well, and that rubs off onto my colleague next door, because we all understand of where we're going, and there's this beautiful alignment, this established instructional alignment. Have I got that right, Ray? And why is that so important to you at Dayton or for any other school?
I just think you've got to get that right. If you haven't got the alignment there, or you haven't got the common language, staff just don't talk together. We were deliberate in the sense that we didn't put people into phase groups. Over here, they're in blocks, all right, which you have to have a junior block and a senior, the way the kids work out. But what we found is the teachers, and I do hate the word, but I'm going to use it, rather organically, they've come together because they understand the language of instruction that runs right across the school. So my kindy teacher can talk to the year 6 teacher about the instructional process because it's the same. My kindy teacher can talk to my year 5 teacher about maths because it's the same program. So there's a scope and sequence. There's a consistent curriculum there. So if one of the teachers if Caleb's having trouble in his year 4-5 class with around a particular concept, he can talk to Lucinda down in the kindy and say, look, although these kids haven't come through yet, what I've found with these classes, they're really struggling with this. So what's the very foundation skill that those kids need at kindy to start building? So it just builds. I had a laugh the other day. I heard a teacher having a conversation, and they actually I've just lied. I heard a colleague repeat a conversation to me. They said, I was speaking about your school, and a teacher said, that's Ray Boyd's school. I'd love to go there because there's things we do that attract them. We only do 2 assemblies a term, and that was the thing that made them attractive. But then she said, but I don't like the fact he tells you what to do. And it's like, hang on a sec. And she was referring to curriculum. So it's like, so you would prefer to go and do your own curriculum. So every year you've got a new batch of kids coming into your classroom, and you don't know where they are.
Yeah.
All we've got is a scope and sequence that says in kindy you do this, in year 1 you do this, pre-primary, and so on. And the teacher can go, in kindy we didn't get that covered, so the pre-primary teacher can go, right, we didn't cover that, we'll build that up and off we go. Like, it just doesn't make sense. That's why I feel, you can hear me get excited about it.
Yeah.
That alignment and that consistency across the school enables the teachers to build those skills as they go. My year 1 teacher builds on what the pre-primary teacher did. My year 2 teacher builds on what the year 1, the P and the K teacher, and so on. If that doesn't happen, by the time they get to year 6, my year 6 teacher's having to do the year 5 curriculum, the year 4, the year 3, the year 2, and that's just hard work.
It just the way you were describing that was when we first started teaching, there was that beautiful white syllabus, the math syllabus, and basically said, laid it all out. And it comes back to that, the simplicity, but complexity as well at the same time. But we all knew what was going on. You also just mentioned that I'd just like to highlight that the year 6 teacher talking to a kindy and vice versa, that's a simple conversation. And it's received with openness, not we don't have to get defensive about it. It's just a comment that then that teacher can just say, basically, thanks for that. I'll make a note and we'll adjust. Rather than, like you were saying, end of the year, we all look at our data and we find and we do the handover, we just move on, you just get what you like, get what you're lumped with.
Yep.
Rather than having conversations throughout the whole year, and it just keeps on getting improving. But obviously there's, different students do different things.
Yep.
Now, you love it. I remember seeing a LinkedIn photo of all of your books in leadership and culture, etc. And you had it laid out on a table, and you're saying, we're about to get involved in this in your school. Are you an avid reader? And what would be, let's say, your top 2 that you'd suggest to any educator, you've got to get your head around this one? Do you have any sort of go-to books, or is there just too many?
Yeah, and that's a hard one because I am an avid reader, and there's certainly a lot more books. As the years progress, a lot more books come on. One I would advocate for anyone just to get their head around is Cognitive Load. It's a simple book. There's plenty out there. Tom Sherrington talks about it. What's his name? Ollie Lovell summarises it as well. So they're using the notion of cognitive load, because if you understand that, it actually helps teachers and even helps principals understand why we have to break teaching subjects down and things down into small steps. And obviously the hard bit within that, Luke, is everyone's cognitive load's different.
Yeah.
So if
100%.
I'm talking to someone talks to me about physics, you've lost me already. Break it down. But if you're talking to me about a marathon running, give me as much statistics as you want, because I'm already all over it.
Yeah.
So, that's the hard bit. In the classroom, you've got 32 kids, each having a different understanding around something. So you have, David Kilpatrick was so on the money. We can't teach to this group. or this group, because the group's this big. Sorry, we can't just focus. So we sort of have to go like this and then try and pick up the outlets at each end.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do. You
Yeah.
touched on it earlier. Everyone's so silo-y. Well, you can't be silo. You're in a school.
Yeah.
So you have to. That's the one. Jump. But cognitive load would be one I would strongly encourage people to get to. I did love what's his name? Dylan Williams' book, Formative Assessment.
Yeah.
And he makes some points in there about understanding where your kids sit, but he also talks about the importance. And there's some research, not recently, but it came out where we used to think if a kid had a great teacher one year and a not so great teacher the next year, the kid would just plateau.
Yeah.
Well, actually, what happens is they actually decline in their performance. Yeah. So Williams' work around that, and Steve Dinham, Professor Dinham's work with Leading and Teaching, I think it's called. They're good go-to books.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't beat a good Wilbur Smith book.
Yeah. That's what you could do when you're on a bit of a holiday. So talking about holidays, etc. What? How do you refill your cup, Ray? You've talked about giving. You've talked about the excitement that you get at your school and seeing people grow. I know you're very big in the coaching space, coaching your teachers, coaching your leaders, growing people. Is that enough to refill your cup, or is there another Ray Boyd out there that refills his cup by maybe no action, just relaxing and meditating? What does that look like?
I'm happy to sit in the staff. Well, I'm happy to just sit in the staff room and quietly listen. I'd rather not talk in some regards, but running is the way I fill my cup. I will go for a run every day. I haven't missed a day for 5 years. That's how I fill my cup. Yeah. And sitting by a fire pit by myself, drinking a beer. Yeah. Where I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just sitting there. As you know, in education, Luke.
Yeah, look, I think that's you've just pointed on a really good point. Is there's two things you were doing there, and we talk about well-being. Is the running, and Brené Brown says that she doesn't meditate, but then when she looked deeper, she swims a lot, and that's where she thinks, and that's quite relaxing for her. So it doesn't actually have to be a still thing. However, that even just sitting and just allowing space and the mind to go where it wants to, especially around, like you said, about the fire pit, we do need those cup fillers. So I was really happy to hear that you can just be in a staff room and listening can fill your cup as much as all these other great things in coaching that you're doing, seeing people grow. But there's also the energy being exerted, but also allowing the brain to slow down. Is there anything that you would like to say to your 20-year-old self, if we could go back in time and say, hey, young Ray, do what you've done, or is there anything that you would change, or you reckon you just nailed it, or what big quote that you might like to give that Ray Boyd of a 20 years old?
I would probably tell myself, don't stop, would be the first thing I'd say. And by that, my father said to me when I sort of backed off from running, he said, don't stop. And I didn't get it until I stopped because it's so hard to start again.
Yeah.
I'd tell myself to listen a lot less to keyboard warriors, what they have to say. For people that haven't, they're not in, what's the poem? Man in the Arena. They're not in the arena, so go away. Theorists are great people. I like theorists, I respect them, but there's theory and there's, okay, we've just hit the battlefield. That's just fallen out the wayside. Yeah. And I'd probably tell myself, don't get into social media. Stay off social media. Stolen focus. It's seriously, you get caught up in so many arguments.
Yeah.
So many arguments. You haven't got time to waste energy on it.
I know, I dare say that'll be something in the future. But you're pretty good with your LinkedIn. You always have some great information, so we'll keep that up. And what about this? I love to ask this very last question in regards to what would you say to someone that's thinking about becoming an educator?
Oh, I'd probably ask them to think long and hard about why, their why of doing it. and understanding that it's not about if you're thinking of getting in because of the holidays, forget it.
Yep.
And if you're getting into it, then understand also that it influences someone's lives. And that brings us back to our earlier part of this conversation, is teaching is a hard job because you have to do it every day, and you have an impact on someone's life every day.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to make that a positive influence. And that's the hard bit, because that's really complex. You got 32 kids in your room as a teacher in a year 6 class, and you're trying to positively impact and reach and touch them in some way to be positive. That's really hard to do. But you have to understand that every action you have as an educator will have an impact on a kid, whether that's positive or negative. And that's the tough job. And it's not getting any, I'll probably almost talk them out of it, but teaching's not getting any easier. It's a very complex job. When I think of when I started my career as a teacher in 1988, and I was in my classroom in a classroom today teaching for an hour and a bit, the complexities around teaching and the kids you're navigating, they are, again, polar opposites of what they were. And what's that, 20 years, 20, 40, 32 years difference? And it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. It is. I love the way that you said think about your why, because, again, the simplicity of it, you're there for little people to make a difference in their lives.
Yep.
But you reiterated it's for every day. Every day, Monday to Friday, you're there. It's a great thought process, because if you are not in that space, teaching can be harder than it needs to be, because your headspace isn't there.
Yeah.
What a lovely note to. Sorry, go on.
No, and on that too, look, we said that to staff. If you're not 100%, don't come to school. And we're not being nasty. It's like, you need to look after yourself, but the kids need you at 150%. And again, when we recruited, we said to staff, don't say you want to be here because it's close to home, because that's not a good enough reason. That might be a reason, but that can't be your why, because teaching's more than, it's so I can be 4 minutes down the road. It comes back to, like you said, you influence a person's life. You can change a person's life just by being a teacher in their classroom.
Yeah, 100%. It's been a fantastic time with you, having that conversation with you, Ray. I really appreciate your time. There's so much to take on board. We thank you, and you keep doing that, all the good stuff that you are doing, and especially giving it out to other people and making a difference and paying it back. Thank you very much, Ray Boyd.
Cheers, Luke. It's been a pleasure.